This is Michael Clara coming to you from Salt Lake City, Utah, with a short podcast titled Dr. Kimberly Mackey Exposes UPPAC. In this podcast that I'm making, I'm a former member of the Salt Lake City Board of Education, and this is about an educational issue that I believe is pretty important that needs to be addressed. So I'm making this podcast, and I'm going to send it to the board members of the state board of members of the state board of education, in the hopes that they will take action and correct the issue that I'm going to bring up. If not, then I'll send it to state legislators, and maybe we need to create some legislation to fix this broken education system, particularly on this level here that I'm going to talk about. UPPAC is the Utah Professional Practices Advisory Commission. They're a committee of 9 educators and 2 community members charged with maintaining and promoting a high standard of professional conduct and ethics among Utah teachers. It's an advisory commission to the Utah State Board of Education, and they make recommendations regarding educator licensing and disciplinary action. And so here in the state of Utah, we have a State Board of Education, and they created a rule that, in Utah, we have, as state legislators make state law. We have a state school board that makes rules. We have local school boards that create policy, but whether it's a policy or even in a city council that makes ordinances, those have the force of law within those jurisdictions. So in this particular case, our state board of education has created a rule or law, if you will, that has allowed this commission to be created. And their job is what I already noted, was to review complaints and decide on disciplinary matters, and basically really be the guardians of ethic, of allowing us in the state of Utah to have ethical, or ensuring that we have ethical educators in place. And we just had a news reporter, Courtney Johns, with ABC News, just did a really good story on what the role of UPPAC is. So, and I'll put the link to that in the comments, but on the YouTube section. But if you can look that up, it'd be a good story to look at, and it gives you an overview of what the role is of UPPAC. The guy sitting here, in my opinion, is really the weak link in this whole process of the UPPAC. He's, I believe, serves as the executive secretary to UPPAC, and I'll explain why I believe that his role in this process needs to be really looked at. What happened was, as I mentioned, I'm a former board member for the Salt Lake City School District, and so as issues, even since I've been off the board, people will contact me and let me know, or ask me for advice on how to solve certain issues. And last year, the current Board of Education here in Salt Lake hired a new superintendent, and in turn, that superintendent has been bringing in a number of administrators to work at the Salt Lake City School District. And as those happen, I kind of would Google the names and look them up. And unfortunately, it looks like the people that are being brought in have a lot of negative history, and makes it questionable whether they could even be effective educators here in Salt Lake City. And so one in particular, Dr. Kimberly Mackey, who you see here, the school district created an executive director, organizational and strategic leadership position or department, and then hired her to be the executive director of that new department. And there's, I could do another whole podcast on just the colossal breakdown that's going on with the local school board, and they're not exercising their authority and acting as guardians of public education here in Salt Lake City. But in this case, I want to talk about on this podcast, I want to talk about the state's role in this process of educators having licenses, and how they've neglected their responsibilities in this. So one of the things that I did in relation to Dr. Mackey, based on some research that I did, is on May 5th, I filed a notification of alleged educator misconduct. And the process is you file that with Ben Rasmussen, and he was the one that was in that picture for ABC News. And so I filed that. And let me explain what my allegation was. It was that she had violated the Rule 277, which is educator standards, and LEA means local education agency reporting. It says, but the one that was concerned about is that I was alleging that she had violated number 8, provide truthful, accurate, and complete information in licensing, transfer, and employment applications and other documentation. So what I had put forth in this allegation to UPPAC was that she did not provide accurate information during the employment application process with the Salt Lake City School District. And in this process, one of the things I did is I did a records request, and I got a copy of her application that she had submitted to the Utah State Board of Education. And what caught my attention, there was a number of things that were catching my attention about her background, just searching online. And then I did some records requests to some places where she had worked in the past, and began just seeing this picture that wasn't making any sense. And that was the basis of my allegation. So for example, here, and I'll just give you some highlights in the interest of time. In December 31st, 2021, Kimberly Mackey submits an application to the Utah State Board of Education for a license. And you see here, she notes that in her degrees, she has a bachelor's and 2 master's, but she doesn't say anything about her doctorate. And then what happens is the following week, on January 4th, the Board of Education, the Salt Lake City Board of Education, this is from their Human Resources report, they hire her as the executive director. And it says here her start date is January 24, and she's getting hired at a salary of $131,000. And that's because there's a base salary, and then she gets a bump in salary, I believe, like by 5,000 or something, like 5 or 6,000, because she has a doctorate, or she told them that she had a doctorate. The following month, on February 15, she does a presentation to the Board of Education, and she introduces herself as Dr. Mackey. The superintendent introduces her as Dr. Mackey, and she says the same thing. They address her as Dr. Mackey, and she's giving this presentation on strategic planning. And she had a slide presentation, but they didn't attach it to the agenda or later on to the minutes. So I heard what she said, but didn't get a chance to view it. Ironically, in part of her presentation, she talks about a quote from this book, 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And she points out, and this is just a side note here, editorial note, I guess I should say. And she talks about that in her role as this executive director, these are the things that she is going to help implement in the district: trust, accountability, and unfortunately that ends up not being what she's done, at least for the local school district. And one of the things that, in doing research on her background, I found this lawsuit that she had filed. So you see, just to give you a timeline here, just this past February 15th, she's being introduced to the Board of Education here in Salt Lake and making a presentation. And then a couple weeks later, she actually files a lawsuit against her former employer, which is the Sacramento School District. And in the lawsuit, one of the things that she mentions, or that is pointed out here, is that she has an ED, an instructional leadership from North Central University, and that even names her dissertation of minority women as superintendents in public education. Why so few? And I already had heard this, had seen that this is what she was claiming, but I never could find any evidence of that dissertation or her being awarded a doctorate. And then on the next page of this lawsuit that she just filed in February, she actually gives the date that she says she obtained her doctorate in December of 2020 from North Central. And I received confirmation, verbal confirmation, then asked for it in writing, sent them an email from North Central University that she does not have a doctorate. No degree has been awarded to her. Nevertheless, on March 31st, 2022, here in the state of Utah, she was issued a license. And there's all kinds of issues with this that I'm not going to go into in this podcast, but suffice to say, she did receive licensure here in the state of Utah. So as a result of just the outline that I just gave, I filed a notification of alleged educator misconduct, and what I indicated it to UPPAC was that I don't believe she was being truthful when she went through the application process with the Salt Lake City School District. And so, and then I point out to UPPAC that she's getting paid, that based on the fact that she has a doctorate, that she introduced herself as such. And I also point out to UPPAC, that she did this presentation. Here's a link to the video where she is verbally saying she's a doctor. However, in the application process to the state office, she doesn't mention the doctorate, which is just another red flag. So then UPPAC has their meeting last Friday, and then on Monday, I believe it was, of this week, I sent an email to Ben Rasmussen, who's the executive secretary for UPPAC, and I asked him, what was the outcome of UPPAC's of my allegation that I submitted to UPPAC. He says UPPAC reviewed the matter and declined to open a case. So this is the problem, that if we have an educator here in the state of Utah, and that I believe and made the allegation was not being truthful, UPPAC's not even going to look into that. So what ends up happening is when Rasmussen tells me that, informs me that UPPAC did not review this matter, I submitted a records request for his emails that he exchanged between him and the district. And he responds a few days later and tells me that he's going to give me some of the emails, but he's going to withhold one of them. And it's my intention to file an appeal and get and try to get a hold of that other email, because I believe it'll shed light on what the problem is here. What's at issue is how did I get that I made an allegation, but the question is, how does UPPAC, who is charged with the responsibility to ensure that we have educators that, they're actually charged with ensuring that there's integrity in our system, that we have qualified people in our education system. But when I make an allegation and I give them the evidence that we have an educator in Salt Lake City that maybe doesn't have the credentials that she's claiming, they don't even want to look into it. So this is what I learned from the emails that he did provide, that he was required to under the Records Act here in Utah. So when I sent the allegation into him, within 15 minutes, he's sending this email to Dr. Mackey. And he says, Dr. Mackey, we recently received a grammar request at USBE asking for records related to your recently granted Utah license. The superintendent provided the requester a copy of your attached licensing application. Subsequently, the requester submitted a complaint to my office alleging that this application was fraudulent, in that no doctorate was identified, even though you are identified as a doctor in Salt Lake City School District board meeting minutes. And then he says, do you have a doctorate? If so, can you tell me why it's not listed on the licensing application? I am required to review complaints received with our Professional Practices Commission to determine if there should be an investigation for purposes of license discipline. Given our history with this complainant, which is me, I anticipate that there's evidence to easily explain the discrepancy. As such, I wanted to reach out to you before we open a case. Feel free to let me know if any questions or concerns. So to me, this is troubling. That I'm just submitting an allegation, but somehow I'm the suspect in this now. So to me, that's a flaw in this system. That if citizens are going to be, I think it just says something about his judgment. That this is the guy that I'm the suspect in this, even though I'm the one just making the allegation. I'm not an educator, but somehow this is my problem and my fault, and I'm the one that's wrong here because he's formed. He's questioning my, integrity at this point. So he doesn't even believe, even though the evidence is there, he wants to question, my right, I guess, to even submit an allegation. So the problem is, what other people are being treated this way, and I wouldn't have known this had I not done a records request. But he's minimizing, then making judgments on people that are submitting allegations, and then they're being minimized and not even looked at. It is the problem. Rasmussen, by the way, sends this email. He CCs Logan Hall at the Salt Lake School District, who is the HR director. And the HR director, human resources director for the local Salt Lake City School District says, Mr. Rasmussen, I was recently made aware of this situation and have asked Dr. Mackey to provide me with substantiating transcripts by the end of today, or the end of today, tomorrow, or the end of the day tomorrow, which would be 5/6/22. I will keep you posted if I have additional information. So this is incredible. This is the human resource director, executive director of human resources, 6 months after she's been in the district, or 5 months, I guess, she's been in the district. He never asked her for transcripts. The only reason he's asking is because he was made aware that I filed a complaint with UPPAC. So this is a colossal failure with the school board. And having an executive like this that has allowed people to be hired in the district without checking their credentials. So it would seem that somebody on the local level or the state level should call for an audit to all the administrators have been hired since Logan has been the HR director, maybe since the new superintendent has come in. Because what happens is when people can get hired and are not required to present evidence that they were awarded the credentials that they're claiming, it's just demoralizing to the other professionals in the district and educational professionals. When I was on the board, there were a number, the vast majority of educators there in the Salt Lake School District have earned my respect. And so this is part of part of my concern is for them, that it's not fair to them that they have worked so hard in the district and that they have attained their educational attainment is they have evidence of it, but we're allowing people to come in from out of state and not even requiring them to provide the same documentation that's required of our people that have lived here and that work in our own community. So anyways, this is a concern that I hope, if somebody in the Salt Lake district will look at this, you need to take care of this problem right here. So the next email exchange that happens is Kimberly Mackey says the next day, "Good morning, Mr. Rasmussen. Thank you for your email. I have a number of questions and concerns regarding this matter, especially as there seems to be personal and private identifiable information shared with the inquirer that may not have been otherwise privy to. Had the grammar request not been fulfilled, possibly in violation of my civil rights. And she signs it, Dr. Mackey. The last email, so that was the end of the email exchange there. The other document that I received as a response to my records request was the agenda for UPPAC. And he gave me a copy of the agenda and appropriately redacted all the other information. So the only one I'm getting, the only item I see, because these are closed door meetings, because they're talking about personnel, is how he listed it on the agenda, which is what I wanted to see, because what he wrote here is not accurate. It's not reflective of my complaint. So one of the questions I have is, does UPPAC see the original complaint that people send in, or do they just allow Rasmussen to be a gatekeeper and misinform them? So when this is put on the agenda, Ms. Mackey allegedly provided false information in her licensing application process, claiming she has a PhD. That's not what my allegation was. My allegation was that she provided inaccurate information during the application process at the Salt Lake City School District. So maybe that's the reason, and hopefully if somebody at the State Board of Education looks into this, can determine maybe UPPAC was misinformed by Rasmussen, and Rasmussen just becomes complicit and perpetuating a system of that we might have a number of educators in the state of Utah that don't have they've not reached the educational attainment to be where they're at. So again, this is about UPPAC, Utah Professional Practices Advisory Commission. In this case, and I actually have other examples where I know over the last 2 years this kind of stuff has happened, which is why I'm making this podcast today, because we need to stop this. Rasmussen, we need to either change the personnel or change the process, because if their role is maintaining and promoting a high standard of professional conduct and ethics among Utah teachers, and really it's educators and administrators included, it's not happening. It's not happening on the state level. It's not happening on the local level, because Dr. Mackey is still working in the Salt Lake City School District, and it doesn't appear that they're taking any action to rectify this situation, which is why I didn't even waste my time with them. I went straight to the state, but now this failure is occurring. And what we're left with in Salt Lake City then, in our community, is just wreaking havoc within our system to have somebody in place who's a supervisor over other people and directing affairs of the district, and is not qualified to do so. And everybody knows this, and so all it does is just create a place of low morale for the adults. And I believe that this kind of, you have unhappy adults at the district level, that's going to filter into the schools. And there's other issues going on. This is just the one I'm focusing in on for this podcast. So hopefully, state school board members, if you see this, please take action and correct this issue on UPPAC.